Hi, everybody. Minus here from Pantheon Plus, and across from me is Hayah. Welcome, Hayah.
Hiya.
Hey, guys. So, as everybody knows, once we wrapped up the class videos, we actually started discussing some of the topics of opinions that have been thrown around in, Reddit, subforums, Discord. There's been a lot of different topics that are a little fiery. There's usually two sides to it. So, we're trying to approach some of these videos by giving either our side, both sides, or we'll bring people on like we did in our last PvP video. So the one that Hayah and myself wanted to talk about today was the concern of instanced versus non-instanced raids and dungeons. And I think Hayah, tell me if I'm wrong, we're both sort of in the middle, being able to look at both of these as a positive sort of each way and some negatives each way, if I'm not wrong, right?
Absolutely. I think both have their merits and maybe their downfalls, but more so.
Okay. So in this video, we're going to kind of try to break this down a little bit. We're going to talk about why we like instanced, why we like non-instanced, and we'll both kind of wrap up where, if we had to pick one, where we would go. So I think what's important before we jump into this too much is let's go ahead right into the verbiage of Pantheon's description of what this is going to be. That's very important to understand. When we make these opinion videos, it's not trying to tell Pantheon what they should do, or it's not trying to say this is what's going to be. In this case, Pantheon is pretty clear about their stance, but it's a good topic to talk about amongst the community. And again, we always really want you guys, whether it is in Reddit or in our comments in YouTube or even in Discord, to chat with us. Let us know what you think. This is a lot of our videos are here's what we think, what do you think, and we want to actually know. So Hayah, before we begin, I'm going to read two things from the Pantheon website that address these topics pretty straightforward. And the first question is, this is in the Q&A if you're on there. The first question is, are dungeons open world or instanced? So all dungeons are open world. There are no plans for instanced dungeons at this time. The dungeons will be very large to handle multiple groups of players. More shards / servers, not even drinking, will be added if overpopulation becomes a problem. Pretty hardcore stance there that there are no instance dungeons. We'll get into that in a second. And the second piece of this is, will you be able to raid in Pantheon? Yes, there will be raid content in Pantheon. That said, the majority of the content is being designed for grouping, while the remainder is for soloing or raiding. Interesting that they pair them together. Now, there's one last one. We went back and forth. There's one more question that's asked under that. It's a lengthy answer, so I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit here. But the question is essentially it involves a end game. Like, what do you want the end game to be like, or Pantheon? What are you thinking end game is going to be like? Is it going to be classic style with difficult raids? Is it going to be levels of difficulty in raids? Is there going to be raiding? So we just read, will you be able to raid in Pantheon? They answered that question. So essentially what this boils down to is that they're being very clear that Pantheon is not going to be like the MMOs that we constantly play that are the popular cookie cutter MMOs. There's not going to be end game. End game. So, and what that means is they're really developing a game that's not going to be about rushing to the end. And they're saying in this answer, and again, you guys can read the full answer on the Q&As on their main site. But in the answer, they're kind of saying that the whole concept of fun only starts at endgame is not in their belief system, and that the natural progression of leveling and playing the game will be very important and ultimately the main focus of development, so that it's not just get to max level and do something cool. You're actually going to see raids, which they've mentioned, at actual lower levels. It's kind of interesting.
Which I think is a super cool idea.
Yeah, and it's weird that it's not really a thing. I mean, can you think of any game that had raids, like in a game that went from 1 to 50 to start, that you could raid at 20?
I never played them. If they are out there.
Yeah, me neither. So their whole theory is, okay, yeah, there's going to be raiding, but the game is being designed around dungeon play, grouping, and the experience of playing, not this perceived end game that you have to race to. And they're even saying that people who find a way to cheat or bug or exploit their way to level without going through the game, without playing that journey, are going to suffer. Not just maybe with bans, but they actually won't be able to perform at high level, or do high level content without first doing these other things. So sort of interesting. Hayah, do you have any thoughts on that before we start kind of breaking the video down a little bit?
No, I agree with the statement that if you're just gonna bum rush to max level and then hope you're good to go, and you're gonna be punished for it, I think that's great because you're not gonna be out in the world taking advantage of the perception system or finding hidden skills or none of that stuff. You're not gonna be geared properly, so I think that's kind of fitting.
Yeah, I like it as well. So the other interesting part here is in both of these questions, they sort of talk about the fact that the game is not being designed for soloing and raiding. They're specifically saying that this game is going to be about dungeons, open world, exploring, experiencing, and it's pretty interesting. I don't want to get too far off topic because that could be honestly a whole nother topic, but let's get into dungeons and raids, and let's start by discussing a little bit about instanced, our experiences, what we think of instance, if we think that like what are the benefits, what are the negatives. So let's go ahead and start with some of the benefits. Why don't you start with that?
I absolutely loved going to a zone and having a group with you, or going there and trying to get a group within that zone, because as they say, they have these large scale dungeons capable of holding multiple groups, different camps, maybe
Are
even
you
different
talking
levels of.
non-instanced, or are you
Yeah,
talking? Oh, I'm
non-instance.
sorry. Okay, so we'll start with non-instance. Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't just
My
want to
bad.
make
Did
sure.
I
Yeah,
did I
yeah.
talk about the wrong thing?
We're not
But
professionals.
no, I really used to love that. Um, it made it really cool, and even if we want to talk about that a little bit, rating content doing the same thing. Not to say the zone and LFG in it, but that you could have, say, two different guilds in the same raid zone doing two different wings of it, or something like.
Yeah, it is actually pretty interesting. For the non-instance side of it, I will tell you we've recently played EQ2 together. It was a game I did not play much of. I played a way more
Same.
EQ1, and then I barely played it, and we did I think what, three of the beginning dungeons,
Two
the
or three. Yeah.
caverns, Blackburrow, and Stormhold, right? So lower level dungeons. Um, and man, I had a blast. I really had a blast. And I think that what I like in this version of a non-instance dungeon is that the mobs respawn. Now, you could possibly do that in an instance dungeon. There's nothing stopping that from happening. But everything we've seen in instance dungeons is like a preset load, and when you kill a group of mobs, they're gone, and that area is clear. And once you clear the dungeon, you leave and you're done. In traditional non-instance dungeons, the ability to take over a room, set up a camp spot, and start fighting and stay there for hours, right? Gaining experience, getting loot, chit chatting, laughing, exploring. I think that the biggest thing with these large scale non instance dungeons is that all of that is brought back, right? There's nothing to explore at an instance dungeon. You just go from point A to point B and then you're done. So I really do like the non instance dungeons. I like the fact that um, it feels alive. You were kind of hinting at that, right? Like when you walk up to a dungeon, there's
Yeah,
people
it's
standing around.
a lot more organic, and it just feels a bit more real.
Yeah, and in games that are very instance heavy, I mean, essentially what it ends up becoming is everybody standing around a certain city, one city out of the many, just standing there waiting to queue or to teleport over and get their group and go in, and then they're done. I feel like if you wanted to go into a dungeon, you were kind of hanging out outside. Maybe you were fighting some mobs with a couple people, and then a couple more people come up and say, "Hey, do you want to group up? Let's go further in." The social interaction that Pantheon's trying to achieve is is going to be bred through having these non-instance dungeons. So
Yeah, and I've made some very good friends in MMOs. That exact being outside of something, struggling to fight a trash mob or two, and then other guys come up, help you. Hey, you want to team up? Okay, couple more, and then the next thing you know, you're at the boss of the dungeon in his room, waiting for him to spawn.
yeah, and when we talk about dungeons, I'd say I'm more on the non-instant side, which is kind of interesting, right? Because these dungeons are pretty large from what we know. And playing EQ2 as an example, we have to think that the dungeons will be larger than EQ2, right? EQ2 was made how long ago? It's easier to make zones now with different palettes and stuff like that that you already have pre-rendered. So it's a little easier to make a larger scale zone now, and a lot of technology enables that to be bigger. So you would say to yourself that we would guess that a Pantheon dungeon is going to be a lot larger, or at least the size of EverQuest 2. And we spent 3 hours in a low level newbie dungeon getting
The other night,
lost. We had no idea where we were.
I still don't know how big that dungeon is.
Yeah, I mean, we went into a side room, and for those of you that have done storm mode, you're like, hey, yeah, I know what you're talking about. We go into a side room. We had camped out one area with like a chessboard, and we did that the night before, and we wanted to go back in because it was still level for us. So we find a well, and you're like, hey, it looks like we can jump down this well. I'm like, let's go.
Do it.
So we jump down this well. We land on a boss. We're fighting the boss. Everything around us is super hard, so we're being careful to go through it. I mean, I that's something you've never experienced if you've only played WoW, right? And that's crazy. And I kind of forgot what that was like. It's been so long since I played EverQuest that I forgot what it was like to sit in a room and BS. And we made you do all the work, right? We made you go pull. So I'm literally just get to sit
everything
here.
around.
Yeah. So you got your puller running around, making sure they're splitting poles or grabbing what's spawning and keeping the timers in their head. And the tank's just like, okay, I'm ready, bring it in. And as a DPS, I'm just sitting there cracking jokes the whole time and giving everyone a hard time and laughing. And man, what a different experience. So yeah, the non-instance side of dungeoning. Now, the problem is going to be overpopulation. So it's going to be real interesting to see how they handle the amount of people that are able to be in zones, because they do mention in that first answer that more shards/servers will be added if overpopulation becomes a problem. And I wonder if that means that, like in EQ2, you could go into World 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. As it got busy, it opened up versions of the world. I'm hoping that it's like that. What are your feelings there?
I agree. I hope it's like that as well, because that's a better alternative than like having multiple world servers where you have to like log out to a different screen, change realms or change servers, and then come, because it's just a whole other hassle then.
Okay, so that covers. I mean, is there anything else you want to add about dungeons? I mean, I think we covered a lot of what we've been through, at least. I mean,
We've praised highly the non-instance,
yeah.
but with that comes a certain bit of ugly, let's say.
Yeah.
Where you might have competition for a single camp, or ne'er-do-wells, let's call it, that will try and take your camp from you, through different means and that kind of stuff, or like races to bosses. These are some of the uglier parts. Some people
Trains.
enjoy those. Yeah, trains. All kinds of like bad play between us players. Some people will just say, well, that's just healthy competition, it's fine. Others will say, well, no, I was here first, this is mine. And it opens a whole other debate.
That's kind of funny, right? We had the huge video about PvP that people are still arguing about, and that's a whole different type of PvP. I may not be able to hit you, but I can compete.
But I'm going to do everything in my power to mess you up using the world.
And you know what's funny? As toxically against I am, is like, I'm an asshole. I'm the asshole PvE guy who hates PvP, and everyone can't believe I'd say that. But it's weird because I don't so much hate that. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to be a guy that goes in and tries to steal camps. I won't be. But when someone does come in, if you have a well-oiled group and you can put them in their place, I do like that. Just to be like, sit there and watch them die when they overpull, everybody back up. Let's be smart about it. Let them die. Let's get back to doing what we were doing. And I think that guild culture is going to play into that a lot. If you have a strong guild, you're going to be okay.
And then this also ties into server identity, where you as a player are going to be renowned, either for good or for bad, for your actions taken in the world.
Yeah. So let's stay in the non-instance, and let's now talk raids. So for dungeons, we both kind of agree that we like the non-instance side. But for raids, it's a much different scenario. If I want to run dungeons in an MMO, I log on, hey, you guys want to run a dungeon, and we go. That's the dungeon culture, right, for the most part. Raids are a lot different. Raids are, okay, on Tuesday. I mean, and don't get me wrong, people who play EQ, and that's all they've played, it's not that different for them. But for people who have played the more popular MMOs, pretty much everything nowadays, the way raiding works is we're going to get on at Tuesday at 9 o'clock. We're going to set aside 3 hours. Please save that time. We'll take small breaks, and we're going to go. That's kind of gone with a non-instance raid. I mean, do you agree with that or?
Yeah, mostly. Um, because in how do I put what rating became when I used to do it in older EverQuest, when it was just this boss has a timer that is this many, give or take, was everyone had a phone number and a page would go out and it was get on or miss it.
Yeah, it's
And
crazy.
I think for myself and maybe a lot of other people in our age bracket, that's not so much an option anymore.
I can barely get you on to do these videos.
Exactly. So like if it's, 2 in the afternoon and, King Uberlute spawns and I get a text, I'm not going to be there.
God, I can just imagine like having a gaming laptop at work. I'm like, guys, I'm going on a half.
Yep, back in 30.
Yeah, it is interesting, right? So we, being honest, we were talking a little bit about this before we started recording. Just say like, what direction are we going to head with it? How are we going to present this video? And something we brought up was that what's the couple complications that could happen is if you do go at 9 o'clock, you show up at the zone. You're gonna have to be a lot more open on what you're willing to camp. So if there's, and we're making these numbers up, but if there's like 5 enemies, 5 bosses in an area, and you want to do boss 4, you may have to settle for camping boss 3, right? And the interesting thing is that you may go into a raid where you end up waiting for a camp spot, and 2 hours pass and you haven't really done much but kill trash, right? And that could wear on some people. And then the other option is, okay, hour 2 passes, hour 3 kicks in, and hey, we have the camp. How many people in your group are like, hey, we have the camp, can we stay now for a couple more hours and make this worthwhile? And there's gonna be a lot of people like, I can't, like, I can only set aside these 3 hours. And there's probably a lot of people out there that are like, well, if you can't put the time in, then
You don't deserve,
you don't deserve to raid. I mean, how much do I play when I play? It's
play
stupid.
hard.
Yeah, I'm not concerned for me. I'm concerned for my friends. I'll stay up till 4 in the morning and wake up at 6. I don't care. I don't sleep. But it is an interesting dynamic of being a raid leader is going to be a lot harder for people who haven't been in this type of environment at all. So, and really wanting specific gear is going to take you. It's interesting. It's actually, I don't know, how do I word this? If there's not, there has to be some sort of lockout or long spawn. That's really where a lot of my thought process is destroyed, because I don't know what they're going to do. They really have to think about this. Like, if our guild kills X boss, can we kill him again? Can we stay there and kill him again, or do we have to leave? Because then at that point, if the boss is on a standard timer instead of a raid timer, because a raid timer is like stuff would spawn like once a day, right?
Um, Old EverQuest, you'd have 3 days, give or take 12 hours, and that was your timer.
Yeah. So it would be interesting if your group killed it, that you got some sort of a lockout and you couldn't engage it for a day. So that would be interesting if the raid boss was on a more standard timer, you could fight your way up and be the group behind that group. They kill it, you swap out. You kill it, the next group that's waiting swaps in. So there is, and I don't know if that's exactly, there's probably people like, oh, that won't work, but something along those lines. It doesn't have to be a quick spawn. It could be once an hour it spawns, once every 2 hours it spawns. So in your 3 hour raid time, you're going to get that boss. There's a lot that they could do with it. It's funny because coming into this video, I honestly was really a lot more concerned with non-instance raiding, and I think that the fact that they're trying to say that raids are not going to be the end all for your gear, that changes raiding a lot.
Oh, very much.
Right? Like, the reason people raid is not because they love raiding, and I love raiding, so I'd be one that says that. But I love raiding because it's the end payoff. That's what I'm trained. I'm like Pavlov's dog, right? Like, oh, tier sets in the raid, let me go get gear. So I'm trained that way, and that's what I do. If this game retrains me to say, well, raids are cool and I want to go see that boss and let's kill him, but I don't need that because I can go into crafting, or I can go into these dungeons and still get myself ready, or I can explore and get ready. It's interesting. It's a complete retraining of the brain.
It makes you rethink your approach when you start thinking about, let's say, end game, because, like they said, the end game's not the end all of this game. It's not the.
it's a crazy thought, right? Because I can't even talk about it without saying end game. Like I'm so programmed to
Exactly. Yeah.
talk that way. It's strange, and like literally just read something that said end game. End game is not going to exist. Now, someone on that's it's maybe player defined, where they're like, well, this is the end all be all, and this is how you're great. But that's interesting. It's interesting. So a lot of good points there on non-instanced. I'm interested to see what the lockout is, and I'm interested to see the respawn time. And that's going to play a lot on if there's a rotation that's healthy, so that guilds can kind of understand. I'm wondering, we've talked a lot about community already in this, and we brought up, meeting people in certain areas and sitting and talking to people in an instance dungeon. A lot of that is the community that Pantheon's trying to rebuild. So, I mean, who's to say that the raiding culture doesn't become this thing where guild leaders are meeting with other guild leaders and be like, what time do you guys usually go? And the guilds working out some sort of calendar. Now, you'll have your rogue guilds that just do whatever the hell they want. But who's to say that that doesn't happen? You keep running into the same guild. Yeah.
You end up with a meta political system within a game. I've seen it happen before. It's cool, and then you have the one crew who just doesn't want to play along, and it throws everything under the dirt. Like I've had sit downs as an officer in a guild with 3 or 4 other guilds, and like we'd meet in a place in the game and we'd chat it out. Like we'd type out, okay, we want to arrange a schedule for this, and this is what we want to do. Where are you guys at with that? And some would agree, some would want something else, and then there was a guy who would be like, nah, I'm out, gate.
Yeah, and it's interesting though, because if you get a big enough coalition of guilds and you're strong, those people who come in and try to do that, or you don't just have to worry about us, you have to worry about our collective, so to speak, Lord of the Rings style. It's an interesting concept, for sure. So let's swap on the other side here. So we both played some WoW, and that's a heavy instance. Bleeding Soul was heavy instance. Almost everything except for EverQuest, really, right? And like some of that era of games. Once WoW took over the industry, instance became a norm of pretty much everything. City of Heroes, I can name some. Terra, Bleeding Soul, Secret World. I mean, everything I can think of is pretty much instance. So I'll let you start again. So instance, what are the benefits that you think are that instance could bring to Pantheon?
By and large, the convenience. If I want to do an instance dungeon, I usually have an interface for it. I click, I want to play. A couple of minutes go by, depending, and you're in a dungeon.
Now, here's my question: Does instance need to have like a teleport in? I mean, instance could also just be everyone has to group up at the door. WoW had that. Before WoW had a looking for group, you had to run across the world to get to Scarlet Monastery if you were Alliance, right? So you ran there and you'd stand outside the door and you'd go in together. So instance, I don't think has to tie into looking for group and insta queues and stuff. Fair point. Absolutely. And I would say that if it did at all, I would instantly be against it for Pantheon. Instantly. Now, it's so hard because I know I'm gonna be completely opposite here. So for dungeons, I don't want instance for dungeons. I have had too much fun playing EQ2, remembering the times of EQ1, and if the dungeons are big enough, I don't care if you run across some people here and there. And this is gonna sound really arrogant. So Nathan, I hope you're watching because you said about arrogant PvEers. I personally feel like the people we've played with and how we play, that when it comes to PvE, because of how hardcore we are in PvE, we don't PvP at all, that I don't fear many groups coming to mess with like the core type of group me and you usually have, or like if our old guild transfers from WoW, I'm not very worried. I think we can outwit them. I think we can beat them in PvE type of combat, even if it is PvP style, like be intelligent with communication. So that it's going to make groups be smarter. But the instance side, like the only things I could argue as a positive is you get to play at your time. You brought up the word convenience, and I hope that was pointful because
there was more. It's an umbrella term,
right? And I don't want convenience in this game. None. I don't want any, and that might spark some conversations. How do you? I don't want to get too off bad, but how do you feel about that whole thing of convenience? Like, would you want a looking for group at all?
Like a dungeon finder where it teleports you in and everything? No, not really. If it ends up in it, like I wouldn't be, raise the pitchforks,
You're
let's
not
go
gonna
at them
not
for
play
it.
it.
But no, I wouldn't boycott it for that reason alone.
I
I don't
don't.
know.
I wouldn't either. I wouldn't. There's not a lot that's gonna make me boycott this game. But you know what it does is the reason I like Pantheon and why I'll argue for Pantheon a lot is because of what their vision. I don't think it ties into their vision.
No, I don't think it does either.
So I think that's where it scares me. So for instance dungeons, I can't provide a whole lot that I'd like other than the fact that you can go at your own pace. Kind of like you said, convenience, and you can go get the gear you want. Again, convenience, right?
And it would eliminate the PvE PvP if that's what we want to coin that, where groups compete for things and try to screw each other up along the way.
Yeah. So yeah, it's funny because the more I think of this, my concerns with non-instance content is the oversaturation, overpopulation. If they handle that, like if a raid, let's say a raid has, I'm just making this up, 10 bosses, and what are they saying? There's going to be up to like 24 people in a raid, I think is the current discussion. If you can have 8 raid groups in there, I'd probably be okay with that. And that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people raiding at the same time. 8 times 24. I mean, that's a good amount of people in one area, and that would leave 2 kind of open areas. So that's the side that has to be figured out. Now, if it's chaos and your whole server can go in, I'm not a fan of that.
It's the Wild West up in here.
Like if you can have 2K people in the raid zone fighting and arguing, and God, don't even turn general chat on. Oh my God, that I'm not into. So the raid side, we haven't really talked instant raids. We kind of hinted on it with the non-instant side that, the timing and scheduling of raids is a really cool guild activity that brings people together, and people will change their lives around a raid. And it's a commitment, and it's to make sure you get to hang out with your group. Do you think it's capable to be done if it's not instance? Do you think you can still have that feel, or do you think you'll lose it?
It largely depends on the types of encounters that are going to be in these so-called raids. What I talked to you briefly about before we started the video was in set it up so that you have to do certain things, check off a list to spawn a bot, and then dedicate your night to doing that.
Yeah, do something that gets you a deep.
Or it's an interesting way to do those
what if
things.
you had keys?
Yep. Or you had to run a quest up to a certain point to get a turn-in material that would then spawn.
And then that key, so you'd have more people would actually just be hanging out behind the door.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting. That's kind of interesting.
I mean, there's a lot of routes to be taken here for how you want to set up a non-instance raid.
It's funny, when we started this video, we said we kind of were on both sides, right? It's funny because I said that because I was thinking to myself, well, I want to be able to go with my group in, and I want to be able to set that time aside. But the more we've talked just right now, and this is why we don't schedule, this is why we don't pre-write these videos, and that's why we don't have like a set time, and we have to be done with this, and this is point A and this is point B, because a lot of our conversation is 2 friends sitting on the couch bullshitting over a beer like, hey, they should do this, and everyone's familiar with that. Everyone can say they've done that, and that's why we do it this way. And it's honest. So why I'm saying that is when we started this video, I'm like, I could argue for both, and I'm having a hard time arguing for instanced.
I think you're swinging to one side a lot more than the other now. Yeah.
I mean, where's your head at? Are you still in the middle, or you don't really care? You just want to play?
I could see the way I could see it working is that you have a lot of dungeons that are, and then if you can amass a raid team and you really want to have a setup time, make some raids instanced, and then you kind of please both crowds.
Yeah, and I think that, that's tough. It makes sense. It does make sense to do that, but then you ask yourself, like, have you lost your hard stance? I feel like this game's been built on so many hard stances that have cracked and been compromised in other games. And I feel like those hard stances are them saying, we're designing this game, and we have faith that you're going to like it if that's what you like. And I feel like that it's like one of those things where if they do that, now people are like, oh, you're changing, what's next? And then dungeons, and I get that that's
slippery slope.
Yeah. And maybe it never means anything. Maybe you have a couple instant dungeons. But it would be pretty cool if they locked it through with like attunements and usable attunements. Like, so this week we want to kill this boss. Let's go do this quest line. Let's get this key. We use it. We're done. we have to go start that quest over again as a guild. You go get this piece, you go get this piece, we're going to meet here, we're going to put them together, we'll have one for next week. And that's kind of cool. That could be a really cool way of doing it.
And that can set up less serious, like not raid nights, but you get a couple of people together and you go farm materials, or you go farm a key, or
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I'm almost talked myself out of instance. And it's funny because we talked about it at the beginning of this video, is that we're programmed. We're programmed. That's how we think now.
Because we've seen it so long and we've lived it for this.
Yeah. And EverQuest people out there are like, I'm not. It's you stupid WoW players. But honestly, I played WoW. See, like I said, I can name a ton of them. Everything was except for like WoW, Final Fantasy 11, some of the originals. That's it. So it is interesting, the more that I talk through this type of concept, that I'm just saying I need to deprogram myself. I think a lot of us need to deprogram ourselves for a lot of things with Pantheon. So we've talked about some concepts there. We've ranted on and we've raved a little bit. Hey, is there anything that you can kind of think of that we didn't like touch on, or that we should touch on, or that people would want to kind of talk about?
No, I think we covered most of it. My closing statement is, when I see you guys all in non-instance content, be excellent to each other. There's no reason to be dicks.
Yeah, and it's not going to last long being a dick. Be excellent.
It's true.
Plus, we have Bill and Ted 3 coming out, so be excellent is totally back in.
Right?
Yeah. I think the non-instance thing is going to work. Guys, I think those that are really scared about mega guilds taking over, stop thinking in the past. Stop thinking about what instance is. Realize that Pantheon can create something different in the middle, and since they already know what they don't want, they understand when creating what they do want. Right? They don't. I can openly say they don't want guilds monopolizing spawns. Right? EverQuest.
I think anyone wants that.
At that point, EverQuest couldn't do much about it. That was how the whole game was made. They couldn't redo the whole game. They don't want that. There's things that they don't want to happen. They want community to be successful. And honestly, the more and more that I think of community, which is a very important word to me, when I think of community, the benefits of a non-instance just are massive to community. It's just so massive. The talking, the sitting. Like I said, in EQ2, in a Lobby dungeon, I had more fun sitting there bullshitting as a rogue. I mean, watching you run around and die accidentally because something you overpulled, or
I got rooted.
Yeah. And like you went AFK and I'm like, I'll pull, and I go and I get rooted and died instantly. So it's fun. And when you die, everyone's kind of afraid of what that's going to mean when you're running back and getting back to your camp spot. Don't die. Dying is another thing we've been programmed to do. Just die, just wipe, we'll come back. Now you're going to be fighting for your freaking life. Like that one time your paladin stays alive and kills a raid boss or a boss, and you're like, yay, now it's going to be like, thank God, res us. So there's going to be a lot more consequence to death. There's going to be more things to fear in the world, and there's going to be players to fear in the world. And this type of fear for other players, I like. I don't like PvP. I like this. So that's my closing argument. Guys, what do you think? Comment, as we say this all the time, but I'm just going to comment in our comments in YouTube. We'll post it on Reddit. Give us some feedback on Reddit on what you think in this topic and in general. And the biggest question I have for you, if anyone's commenting, please consider answering this question. Can you look in the mirror and say how programmed you are? I just did. This whole video was about me being like, wow, I'm so programmed to think that. Realize that. It just, like, my mind opened up to so much more. I'm so programmed on what things were and how there's one or two ways. There's EQA or WoW way. No, there's something in the middle. And I think that if we can achieve that middle ground, everyone's going to be feeling pretty good about it with what it brings. So please, if you like our content, we keep saying it, subscribe. We're trying to build our channel into being something you can kind of look through. Pantheon.plus if you want to find other content creators' content, chat with us in the community there. Thank you guys. We're going to do more of these style topics. We have some booked up, but if there's certain things you'd like us to talk about, throw it in one of the comments. We're always reading them, trying to respond. So feel free to give us ideas if there's something specific you want to talk about. I think coming up on our discussion is we're going to talk about guilt, which I'm super excited. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to talk about guilds. And then we're actually looking at getting some people in the community who are really into crafting, who run a couple different crafting websites, to come on and talk crafting with us. Because if we're talking crafting, this is what my face is going to be like the whole time.
Uh-huh.
That
Yeah.
sounds good. I don't craft. We want to get a crafting video out there. We want to give our opinions on some things, but we want to get people who actually know what they're talking about. So we'll see if we can do that. Thank you, everybody. Like I said, just hit that subscribe button if you like us. And if you don't, tell us why. See how we can earn it for you. Thanks, everybody. Hayah. Thanks again, buddy.